went to the wrap party, that this was it for the Andy Griffith Show.
Ron Howard may have been the red-headed darling of the Andy Griffith Show, but life behind Mayberry's white picket fences wasn't always so picture-perfect. While viewers saw a tight-knit small-town family on screen, the real dynamics were far more complicated. Sure, Howard shared laughs with Andy Griffith and Don Knotts, but there was one cast member he quietly loathed, and he wasn't alone. That same person also sparked the one feud even Andy Griffith couldn't forgive. The tension was real, the resentment ran deep, and for decades it was kept tightly under wraps, until now. This is the castmate who drove a wedge behind Mayberry's curtain. The Andy Griffith Show may be remembered as one of television's most wholesome and nostalgic sitcoms, but behind the sweet southern charm of Mayberry lay a world far more complex. Premiering on CBS on October 3, 1960, and running until April 1, 1968, the show delivered 249 half-hour episodes over 8 seasons, 159 in black and white and 90 in color. And while it portrayed a simpler time, the making of the show wasn't always as peaceful as the town it brought to life. The show actually began as a backdoor pilot on The Danny Thomas Show, introducing Andy Griffith as Sheriff Andy Taylor, a widowed lawman raising his young son Opie, played by a young Ron Howard, in the sleepy town of Mayberry, North Carolina. Though the setting was fictional, Griffith described its feel as distinctly nostalgic, more reminiscent of the 1930s than the 1960s when it was filmed. It was of a time gone by, Griffith later reflected, capturing the show's magic. The cast of characters quickly became beloved American icons. There was the overly eager but hilariously inept Deputy Barney Fife, brought to life by Don Knotts, the kind and steady Aunt Bee, portrayed by Frances Bavier, and of course, the precocious yet grounded Opie. Together, they formed a heartwarming family unit that seemed to echo real-life connections, or so fans thought. Despite its warm comedic tone, the Andy Griffith Show wasn't immune to conflict. Tensions simmered off camera, especially as egos clashed and personalities didn't always mesh. One feud in particular, between Andy Griffith and a fellow cast member, would remain hidden for decades, kept out of the spotlight while the cameras rolled. But not even Mayberry could keep secrets forever. Still, the show was a massive success. It never ranked lower than 7th in the Nielsen ratings, and in a rare feat, it ended its final season at number 1. Only I Love Lucy and Seinfeld share that honor. While Griffith never received an Emmy during the show's run, co-stars Knotts and Bavier claimed 6 between them. The legacy lived on with spin-offs like Gomer Pyle, USMC, a 1986 reunion movie, and the continuation series Mayberry RFD. To this day, fans celebrate Mayberry at an annual festival in Griffith's hometown of Mount Airy, North Carolina, still clinging to a town that never really existed and a show that was anything but simple behind the scenes. But while the myth of Mayberry continued to enchant audiences, one boy from that set was quietly preparing for a life beyond the front porch and fishing pole. Background on Ron Howard. Ron Howard may be best known today as an acclaimed Hollywood director, but long before he stood behind the camera, he was America's favorite red-headed boy on one of TV's most beloved sitcoms. Born on March 1, 1954, in Duncan, Oklahoma, Ronald William Howard was born into a showbiz family. His father, Rance Howard, was an actor, writer, and director who adopted the stage name, Howard, after being born Rance Beckenholt. At the time of Ron's birth, Rance was serving a 3-year term in the U.S. Air Force. His mother, Jean Spiegel Howard, was an actress herself, making show business a family affair from the very beginning. Ron's heritage is a blend of German, English, Scottish, Irish, and Dutch roots, an American mix that mirrored the wholesome characters he would come to portray. He was educated partly on the sets of studios like Desilu, where he was tutored as a working child actor, and partly in California's Burbank schools, including John Burroughs High School. Though he later attended USC's prestigious School of Cinematic Arts, he didn't graduate. His calling was already pulling him elsewhere. By the age of 5, Ron Howard had already racked up an impressive resume. His first credited film role came in The Journey, and he soon popped up in various TV shows like The Twilight Zone, The DuPont Show with June Allison, and Dennis the Menace. The Menace and the Many Loves of Dobie Gillis, but his true breakout came in 1960 when he landed the role that would change everything, Opie Taylor on The Andy Griffith Show. Credited then as Ronnie Howard, he played the young son of Sheriff Andy Taylor, Andy Griffith, for all 8 seasons of the series. Looking back on his first days on set, Howard once recalled being preoccupied with a toy turtle he had to pretend was real and dead. "I remember him looking at that little turtle and talking to me about how it was kind of funny to have to pretend that it was dead," he said. "So I recalled just a very relaxed first impression." That balance of gentle guidance and subtle humor was exactly the kind of tone that defined the series. Even though it aired in the 1960s, The Andy Griffith Show deliberately leaned into a tone of old-fashioned Americana. It was timeless, nostalgic, and radiated the warmth of a simpler era. Alongside Don Knotts' unforgettable portrayal of Barney Fife, Frances Bavier's wise and nurturing Aunt Bee, and a colorful ensemble of Mayberry townsfolk, the show became a staple in American homes. Though it never won an Emmy for Outstanding Comedy Series, it was nominated 3 times, and co-stars Knotts and Bavier won 6 acting Emmys between them. But Howard's career didn't stop when The Andy Griffith Show ended. In fact, it only picked up steam. In 1974, he found a second wave of fame playing Richie Cunningham on Happy Days. What began as a segment of Love, American Style quickly spun off into a hit series. As the wholesome, clean-cut Richie, Howard played the perfect foil to Henry Winkler's leather-jacketed, street-smart Fonzie. On set, their chemistry was real both on-screen and off, and the duo helped catapult the show into pop culture legend. Still, Howard had his sights set beyond acting. Even while filming Happy Days, he was already exploring life behind the lens. His directorial debut came with the 1977 film Grand Theft Auto, a low-budget action comedy co-written with his father. The opportunity was part of a clever deal with producer Roger Corman. Howard would star in Eat My Dust in exchange for the chance to direct his own film. It was a turning point. Throughout the late 1970s and early 1980s, Howard directed several TV movies for NBC, including the 1980 film Skyward starring screen legend Bette Davis. But his big break as a director came in 1982 with Night Shift, a wild comedy featuring Shelley Long, Michael Keaton, and Henry Winkler. It marked Howard's arrival as a new creative force behind the camera. From there, he was unstoppable. In 1984, he directed Splash, a romantic fantasy comedy starring Tom Hanks, Daryl Hannah, Eugene Levy, and John Candy. The film was both a box office and critical success, proving Howard could deliver hits with heart, humor, and wide appeal. What began with a toy turtle and a role as Opie Taylor became a lifelong career. Ron Howard was never just a child actor, he was a storyteller in training. And once he stepped behind the camera, he made sure Hollywood never forgot it. But before the awards, the box office triumphs, and the directorial acclaim, Howard cut his teeth on a set that wasn't nearly as sunny as it seemed. Behind the gentle pace of life in Mayberry, real tension simmered, tension that no camera could fully capture. Tensions on the set of The Andy Griffith Show. The drama on The Andy Griffith Show didn't just unfold in front of the camera. In fact, some of the most emotional storylines were happening behind the scenes, between 2 of the show's biggest stars. Andy Griffith and Frances Bavier were television royalty, iconic figures of mid-20th century entertainment, best known for their warm portrayals of Sheriff Andy Taylor and Aunt Bee. But while they radiated harmony on screen, off-screen their relationship was anything but friendly. Much like the famously strained friendship between Selena Gomez and Francia Risa, the tension between Griffith and Bavier added a dramatic layer to an otherwise feel-good classic. For decades, this rift has sparked curiosity among fans and entertainment historians alike. The root of their friction lay in deep personality clashes and differing professional values. It wasn't a brief misunderstanding. It was a Cold War that quietly simmered behind Mayberry's white picket fences and followed them long after the final episode aired. This behind-the-scenes feud, often whispered about but rarely confirmed, has become part of the show's deeper legacy, one that complicates the rosy nostalgia viewers associate with the Andy Griffith Show. At the show's heart was Andy Griffith, playing the calm and collected Sheriff Andy Taylor. With a steady hand and a disarming smile, Sheriff Taylor brought peace to Mayberry without ever raising his voice. He was a widowed father, a wise lawman, and a steady moral compass for the town, balancing parenting, policing, and neighborly disputes with timeless grace. His charm defined the show's tone, warm, grounded, and quietly heroic. Sharing that warm space on the show was Frances Bavier, cast as Aunt Bee, Andy Taylor's no-nonsense, kind-hearted aunt. Aunt Bee wasn't just a caretaker. She was the emotional center of the Taylor household. Her character provided comforting meals, gentle scoldings, and homespun wisdom. Bavier's portrayal made Aunt Bee a cultural touchstone, the quintessential television aunt. Together, Sheriff Taylor and Aunt Bee represented a sense of home and community that millions of viewers adored. But while their characters painted the perfect picture of small-town family life, reality behind the scenes was far more turbulent. According to classic country music, the tension between Griffith and Bavier stemmed from fundamental differences in how they approached their craft, and each other. Bavier, known for being deeply private, maintained a deliberate distance from her co-stars. While Andy Griffith was warm and sociable off-screen, Bavier preferred solitude. To some, this came across as cold or standoffish. But it wasn't just her reserved nature that caused friction, it was her exacting standards. She took her role seriously and expected the same from everyone around her. Ron Howard, who played Little Opie Taylor, has often spoken about the positive impact Griffith had on the set. However, Howard Morris, who played Ernest T. Bass and directed several episodes, once described working with Bavier as like navigating a landmine. A seemingly simple direction, such as asking her to move a few inches for camera framing, could trigger strong resistance. She was particular about her space and presentation, and any challenge to that was unwelcome. Her precision, while admirable, sometimes led to uncomfortable standoffs with her colleagues. In an interview cited by Cheat Sheet, Griffith himself shared one memorable and painful attempt at reconciliation. He had once visited Bavier unannounced at her home, hoping to mend fences. The gesture backfired. Bavier, fiercely protective of her privacy, was not pleased by the surprise visit. Rather than healing old wounds, the encounter deepened them, reinforcing the wall between them. But as life has a way of humbling even the most resolute hearts, change eventually came. Near the end of her life, Bavier was battling cancer, a fight that brought with it moments of reflection. She picked up the phone and called Griffith. After years of tension, she was ready to speak honestly. Griffith later recalled the moment, saying, "Bavier apologized sincerely. I'm sorry we didn't get along better. It was my fault." She admitted to being difficult, acknowledged his leadership on the show, and credited him with much of its success. It was a powerful gesture, one that finally put to rest years of unresolved emotion. Frances Bavier passed away in 1989 at the age of 86. Though raised in New York City, she spent her final years in North Carolina, the very place her character Aunt Bee had lived on screen. She retired from acting in 1972 and embraced a quieter life in Siler City, a small town where she found peace and connection. Locals recalled her as private but kind, a far cry from the misunderstood persona she carried in Hollywood. Toward the end of her life, Bavier struggled with serious health problems, particularly heart-related complications. She spent her final days under medical care at Chatham Hospital. Just a week before her passing, she was released from the coronary care unit. Though her condition remained fragile, Frances Bavier's health continued to decline. While her official cause of death was never publicly confirmed, many believe it was due to her ongoing heart issues. Even in her final chapter, she maintained the same dignity and reserve that had defined her life and career. Andy Griffith would also live to the age of 86. According to CNN Entertainment, he passed away quietly at his home on Roanoke Island, North Carolina, early one Tuesday morning. The specific illness that led to his death was not disclosed, but his passing marked a deep loss in the world of entertainment. Griffith's family released a statement confirming he had been buried in Roanoke Island, his beloved sanctuary and the place where he'd found personal peace. The passing of both stars marked the close of an era, but it also reminded fans of the deeper stories that exist behind television's polished surface. Even though Andy Griffith and Frances Bavier spent many years at odds, they eventually found the grace to reconcile. In the end, it wasn't about who was right or wrong, it was about two artists recognizing the humanity in each other and choosing to let go. The legacy they left behind is one of talent, heart, and ultimately, forgiveness. And while the Andy Griffith Show chapter closed in Ron Howard's early life, there was another story quietly unfolding, a match made in heaven. There's a kind of love that doesn't make headlines every day. It doesn't scream or demand the spotlight. It just endures, quietly, steadily, decade after decade. That's the love story of Ron and Cheryl Howard. Hollywood has no shortage of whirlwind romances, public heartbreaks, or headline-grabbing flings. But in the middle of all that noise, Ron and Cheryl built something rare, something real. On June 7, 2025, they celebrated 50 years of marriage, half a century of growing, dreaming, building, and still choosing each other every single day. Ron marked the golden anniversary with a photo of the two of them standing on the beach at sunset. No big production, no red carpet, just the warm glow of twilight and two people who've spent most of their lives in sync. He said he was grateful for the family, the memories, and the journey, describing their love as a river ride through calm waters and tricky rapids. He credited their success to a simple secret: they just kept paddling. They were only 16 when they met, two teenagers in California with bright eyes and bigger dreams. He had freckles and that famous red hair. She had a quiet strength and the kind of presence you don't forget. He always said there was never anyone else, she was it. Their first date was classic 1970s romance. Ron picked Cheryl up in his mint green Volkswagen Beetle, took her to the movies, and then they grabbed pizza. The car was nothing fancy, but it got them where they needed to go. Years later, Ron would laugh and say, "It still runs great. So do we." 5 years after that date, they stood in Burbank, California, and said, "I do." It was June 1975. The guest list included friends, family, and a few Happy Days co-stars, including the late Tom Bosley. Ron had just started on the sitcom a year before, and life was moving fast, but he knew Cheryl was his constant. And yet, she didn't say yes right away. In fact, it took 3 proposals. Cheryl, always thoughtful and intentional, told him she wasn't ready, not yet. She had things she wanted to do, school, life, a future she could shape for herself before tying it to his. Their daughter Bryce would later describe her mom as a force of nature, the kind of woman who kept everyone grounded, even Ron. Looking back, Cheryl said it was Ron's love for storytelling that drew her in. It still does. Together, they raised 4 children, including Bryce and Paige, who followed them into the world of film. But the Howards were never just a Hollywood family, they were a team, a unit. Cheryl once wrote that their shared passion for stories brought them together, and it was clear that love became the greatest story they ever told. Their daughters often described Cheryl as the heart of the family. Paige once said that trying to explain how much they loved their mother brought tears to her eyes. She called Cheryl the stars, the sun, and the moon, their guiding light. Still, it wasn't always easy. Ron admits it takes more than just love. Communication matters. So does luck. But most of all, he says, you have to grow together. You have to change, adapt, let each other evolve, and keep finding your way back to the middle. That's how their chemistry stayed strong. That's how their lives remained aligned, even as their worlds expanded. Ron says he feels supremely fortunate, not just for their love, but for the lessons, the blessings, and the quiet understanding that has carried them through 5 decades. From late nights with newborns to early call times on set, from heartbreak to celebration, they've lived it all together. For their anniversary in 2023, Ron surprised Cheryl by taking her for a drive in that same mint green VW Bug, yes, the one from their very first date. They took the long way, let the wind in, and remembered where it all began. No fancy restaurants, no champagne toasts, just the road, the engine's soft hum, and 50 years of memories between them. Hollywood often forgets the quiet kind of love, the patient loves, the kind built not in fairy tales but in kitchens and minivans and sleepy goodnights. But Ron and Cheryl didn't forget. They'd lived it, protected it, nurtured it. Their love story isn't loud, it doesn't need to be. It's steady, rooted, eternal, and after 50 years, it's still just getting good. Ron Howard's controversies. Very few actors are able to leave a lasting mark both in front of the camera and behind it, but Ron Howard is one of the rare few who did it, and did it better than almost anyone else. He's part of a very small club that includes big names like Clint Eastwood, Greta Gerwig, Jordan Peele, Bradley Cooper, and George Clooney. But unlike most of them, Howard is more famous for the movies he's directed than the ones he's acted in. It all started with television in the 1960s and 70s. His face was everywhere, as Little Opie in The Andy Griffith Show, and later as Richie Cunningham in Happy Days. Howard became one of America's most loved child stars, but behind that friendly face was someone watching and learning, preparing for something much bigger. In 1977, he took his shot at directing with a wild little film called Grand Theft Auto. It had nothing to do with the video game. It was fast, messy, and full of heart. From that point on, Howard became a regular name in Hollywood. But it wasn't an overnight rise. He had to stumble a few times. In the 1980s, he directed Splash, a fun romantic fantasy with Tom Hanks, and Willow, a bold adventure story. They showed his talent, but not everyone took him seriously yet. The 90s didn't help much either. A few of his films landed flat, and some critics began to doubt if he'd ever deliver something great. Then came the new millennium, and with it, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, and just a year later, A Beautiful Mind. This was the moment everything changed. A Beautiful Mind told the real-life story of John Nash, a brilliant mathematician who battled mental illness. It was powerful, moving, and unforgettable. The film starred Russell Crowe, Jennifer Connelly, Ed Harris, and Christopher Plummer. Long before the Oscars, people already felt it would sweep, and it did. Howard walked away with Best Director, and the film took home Best Picture, Best Supporting Actress, and Best Adapted Screenplay. But not everyone was clapping. Some were angry. Important details about Nash's life had been left out: his bisexuality, a child he had outside his marriage, the fact he didn't support that child, all missing. Critics accused Howard of softening the truth. He later admitted those parts were removed to focus on the heart of the story. But that didn't stop the backlash. What bothered Howard most wasn't the criticism. It was how it started to affect Nash personally. That, he said, was crossing the line? Who did Ron Howard utterly despise? For someone who spent nearly 7 decades in the spotlight, Ron Howard has built a reputation as Hollywood's calmest storm. He's steady, soft-spoken, the kind of director studios trust when they don't want drama, just results. But even a man like that has lines he won't let others cross. And in the last few years, those lines have gotten clearer. Howard once turned J.D. Vance's best-selling memoir Hillbilly Elegy into a high-profile Netflix film. It was a project Howard approached with care, focusing on the grit and resilience in Vance's upbringing at the time. Politics didn't dominate their conversations. Vance wasn't a senator then. He wasn't even involved in politics. That suited Howard just fine. He wasn't looking for a policy partner, he was looking for a story. But the man Howard once tried to understand has since taken a different path. Vance is now a politician, possibly on the verge of becoming vice president, and his current rhetoric is a world apart from the person Howard once knew. The filmmaker has made it clear, without any dramatic outbursts, that he's both surprised and disappointed by what Vance has become. Howard isn't one to lash out publicly. That's never been his style. But this time, something cracked. For someone who has spent his career avoiding controversy, his recent tone carried weight. The shift wasn't just political. It was personal, not unlike another moment in his life, many decades earlier, when a seemingly sweet co-star made life on set far from wholesome. Long before A Beautiful Mind or Apollo 13, Ron Howard was a child star on The Andy Griffith Show, America's favorite feel-good series. On screen, it was all folksy charm, but behind the scenes, things weren't always sunny in Mayberry. Most fans assumed the cast got along just as well off camera as they did on it. But there was one cast member young Ron dreaded sharing scenes with Frances Bavier, better known as Aunt B. She was stern, cold, and never treated him like the adored kid America thought he was. While the audience saw a loving aunt fussing over her nephew, Howard saw something else entirely, someone rigid, demanding, and almost impossible to connect with. Even decades later, when asked about his time on the show, Howard never pretended Aunt B was his favorite memory. Back then, of course, Howard didn't speak out. He was just a boy playing Opie. He kept his head down, did his job, and smiled through it. But there were moments when that smile slipped, like during the infamous Pickle Story episode, where Opie had to devour jars of Aunt B's famously awful pickles. What audiences didn't know was that Ron absolutely hated pickles. Eating them over and over for multiple takes was pure misery. And working opposite Bavier during that scene? The emotional cherry on top. That tension stayed buried for years, never fully addressed. But those who knew the cast behind the curtain would later confirm it. Howard and Bavier simply didn't get along. She wasn't cruel, but she was icy. She never warmed to him, and as he grew older, that distance didn't fade from memory. It lingered, not in bitterness, but in clarity. Howard had learned early what it felt like to work with someone who made you feel small. So when J.D. Vance began speaking in ways that clashed with the vulnerable story Howard once tried to share, it triggered something old. This wasn't just politics. It was about trust, empathy, and being blindsided by someone you once thought you understood. He didn't have to call anyone out. The silence between his lines said enough. Years earlier, Howard had faced criticism for A Beautiful Mind too. The film swept the Oscars, but it also drew backlash for omitting major truths about its subject, John Nash. It was a reminder that telling someone else's story, especially someone complicated, comes with risk. If you soften the edges, someone will notice. If you tell too much, someone will protest. Either way, the storyteller carries the burden. And now, watching Vance's political rise, Howard is carrying another burden, not because he made a bad movie, but because the man at its center became someone unrecognizable. It's the same sting he felt decades ago, when the warmth he had to fake for Aunt B never matched the chill she sent his way. Howard's takeaway: don't assume what's behind the smile. A cozy script, a charming persona, a best-selling book, none of it guarantees authenticity. People can shift, they can disappoint you, they can rewrite their own stories in ways that leave you questioning why you ever tried to help them tell it in the first place. Still, Howard isn't bitter. He's evolved from an uncomfortable child actor to a director with Oscars on his shelf and decades of trust banked in Hollywood. He's learned to pick his moments, and this moment, this political one, was worth speaking on. He didn't rant, he didn't attack. He reminded people of one thing: watch closely, think critically, and for the love of everything, vote. Because the stories we believe today shape the headlines we wake up to tomorrow. And if anyone understands how easily a character can fool an audience, it's Ron Howard. He's seen it play out on screen, on set, and now, on the national stage. What Ron Howard's movie have you seen? Let us know in the comments below. Also, like, subscribe, and click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.